Welcome to our public board meeting. Thank you for coming along. We've got some external guests in Matt, who's here for our girls today. I think we might be Andy in a wee while. We have online, we've got Mark today, and I know you need to pop out for part of the meeting, Mark, so we'll excuse you when you need to pop away. I think we might have apologies for the afternoon session from Marta. I'm still recovering. But most importantly, I want to say a warm welcome to Steve, who in his first meeting with us in his capacity as our new Patient Partnership Council Chair. So you're very welcome. But our very special guest this afternoon is Emma, who has come to share with us her experience as a service user of our services, supported by Callum and SAS. I think we're going to see a video display first off about Emma's experience and the services she's had. And it's quite good after this morning's conversation because Emma had the benefit of the services at the CDC that we were talking about earlier, so which I also visited and fabulous. So I'm delighted that we're hearing a little bit about that. And Emma is very happy, perhaps at the end, to answer a few questions if we do have any. So thank you for coming, and we look forward to hearing about your experience. Thank you. Oh yeah, thanks, Callum.
Hello, my name is SAS Banerjee and I am one of the surgeons at the Trust. I also had the privilege of being the cancer clinical lead and the clinical lead for gastroenterology and endoscopy. I was lucky enough to be part of the team that helped create the vision for the Community Diagnostic Centre at Barking Community Hospital. And it has a fantastic range of services, which includes a one-stop shop for cancer diagnostics, including the transnasal endoscopy, which is performed at the Barking CDC. And patients often get the opportunity, if clinically indicated, to have a CT scan on the same day. This allows us to be able to reassure patients within 7 to 10 days of a referral from their general physician about their diagnosis. And most of the time it's a reassurance, and sometimes the news isn't as good as it needs to be, and we are able to expedite their care and their further management. In addition, what we've been able to do is move services to the Community Diagnostic Centre, which includes our capsule service, also our GI physiology service, and the capsule sponge service. And this is what we call as the EndoLite service, which happens at Barking CDC. This has created space within the acute site to be able to expedite care of patients that require sedation and for more complex procedures. The presence of the CT scanner, the MRI scanner, the ultrasound scan at the Barking CDC, plus access to phlebotomy, has led us to create a fantastic opportunity for our patients. And this has been really well received by patients within the Barking and Dagenham, but also within North East London.
I went to the GP because I had severe bloating, like abdominal pain, couldn't eat, couldn't rest, couldn't sleep, couldn't do anything. So I went to my GP and she obviously see all my symptoms. So she was extremely concerned, to be honest, because even when I was laying down, the bloating was excessive. I shouldn't have that much considering I'm quite an active person. So she put me through all the tests that she deemed fit. Barking CDC is great, very clean. You know, the staff there were amazing. Waiting times were a lot less. I ended up getting to the CDC at around, I think, 10:30, and both of my appointments were done by 3:30. So I had both scans done there, so the TNE, right, and the CT scan. I actually had my CT scan done first. My appointment was scheduled for 11:30, which I did go in on time. by the way. I wasn't sitting there waiting because they knew I was hungry and I just wanted to get home. So I had my CT scan done first. They just put the dye in, put me through the machine. They talked me through what was going to happen whilst I was in there because I was panicking. I was like, what if I get stuck? Because I was so close. Obviously, I didn't. And yeah, they took me through it. They did say to me if there was anything major on my scan, they would let me know there and then. But nothing major showed up. I did get some results sent off to my GP, which was just quite a thick lining on my sigmoid colon. And then my TNE was around about 3:30, but I had already finished my CT scan at, I think, about 12:30. So I went and approached a lady and I said, look, I've got another scan at 3:30. I don't really want to go all the way home and then have to come back. So the lady went to the reception and explained. She also went up to the surgeons and said, the lady's already here for her appointment. Is there any way you can put her in quicker or you can see her now? But they was all on their lunch break. But they stopped their lunch break and then they called me up. So they brought me up within like half an hour. I wasn't frightened or anxious about anything. They actually talked me through everything that was going to happen. So even before I went into the room, they told me, okay, this is the process. We're going to spray your nose, obviously, with numbing spray? So they sprayed on my nose with numbing spray. And then they spoke me through the entire process of how it's going to insert in my nose, go down my throat. It would take about 3 minutes in total, which it did. And I had obviously the two surgeons one side, and then I had what was her name? I think her name was Cotton. I'm sure her name was Cotton. She was just amazing. She was talking me through it. She was calming me down. She was reassuring me, okay, you're going to be okay. Just try to stay still. Let's just examine in your stomach and see what's going on. So then we can give you a result of why you're having these problems. Amazing. So, the care was great. The waiting times were reduced. I didn't even know about the CDC until I actually went there. Parking, accessible parking, lower ground floor. I was all ground floor. There was upstairs as well, which is where I did go up at one point. But, it was accessible to everybody. Parking, I wasn't getting frustrated with trying to pull up somewhere. It was easy. It was in and out. I don't want to, or most people don't want to go somewhere and wait for like 8-9 hours. If it's an emergency situation, and they gave me that opportunity. I had a 2-week leeway from everything that I had to have done, checked, so forth and blah, blah, blah. And I was seen within a week. I had my results the same day. My results went back to my doctor the same day. My doctors then followed up. And I don't really think you're going to get that care anywhere else. So I was extremely grateful about the whole thing. I really was. Because if I did have cancer, I would have wanted to have known there and then. I wouldn't have wanted to have waited months and months and months. So they gave me that opportunity to have all of that done. So after I got my results back, I found out that I had the hiatus hernia straight away. The surgeons told me, you've got a hiatus hernia. This is why you're experiencing this many problems. And they just gave me a little breakdown of what to do and what not to do. So like, don't eat spice, just salt, pepper, like anything that can trigger the hernia. But then that went back to my doctors. So as soon as I got that back to my doctors, that's when they started me on all the anti-acid reflux tablets, which is quite a lot. And they don't work. So then I've been referred back to another facility of care.
No, it's horrible listening to yourself.
My ears, I just try to block them out, my own voice, yeah.
Thank you. Fabulous to hear what a wonderful experience you had in terms of speed and access and all of that. It sounds like you've still got some issues going on that you're getting support with.
Yeah.
So it's not quite fully fixed for you, but at least you had the good news that you didn't have cancer.
Yes.
But it does sound like a really good facility, and hopefully you've been telling everyone that it's the place to go if you need to go and have these kind of.
Yeah, I'd definitely go there again.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to go anywhere else. I'd be like, nah, send me back there.
That's really good. I know, and I have my biggest my new thing is that we need to get more services on offer in the CDC. It's such a good place to go. So we would like more people to use it, so it's available to more patients because it's such a fabulous setting. Any particular questions or observations? I know, yes, Hans.
So, Emma, thank you for presenting, and it must be quite harrowing sitting here, but you are amongst friends. I think what I would like to say is that for our board to understand the one-stop shop approach for any form of a patient who's facing uncertainty is the right thing to do, especially when referred on the urgent suspected cancer pathway. That reduces the diagnostic time, because the pinch points of waiting for another appointment, another investigation is just not fair. It happens to us, it happens to our next of kin. And I'm glad it's worked out well for Emma. And I think that's what, as a system, as an organization, we need to continue to deliver.
And it just feels like it's more efficient as well. And really satisfying for our staff. You know, I came and visited Sass and the team, and the clinicians who work there, they really love what they do because it's really satisfying to be able to support someone like Emma, who obviously feels so much more relieved and much more comfortable. So it works better for everybody. Right.
Yes, Sue. One of us always asks this question, Emma. Having experienced the CDC, what do you think we could do to make it even better?
Build some more.
Could you tell that to the Secretary of State?
I would. You let me meet him. No, I would. Yeah, because you know, what I went through was quite scary, and I wouldn't wish that upon anyone. And I believe if there was more, then everyone would have that same treatment as what I did.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll meet them. I'll put it across.
It also sounds like you've got a really good GP as well. Which
Oh, my GP is fantastic.
It's really helpful, and we know that's not the same for everybody, so it's a big part of the journey starting well and you getting that
Yeah.
referral into the right place.
One of the things about our one-stop services is that we allow people to, or we need to allow people to get into those services without lots of barriers, because what often happens is there are lots of barriers to referrals and it delays the patient being referred. And I think what that's particularly done, I know Fiona's really keen on, so we actually allow people to come at a relatively early stage, so they get everything done there and then. They don't wait months as a GP patient before they're allowed to be referred.
Anyway, did you have a point?
Well, I was going to thank you, Emma. It's really helpful, and it's great to see the video, and I guess that's part of the answer. But how do you think we can convince more patients to go down this route? Because I remember the day the service opened, it was inspiring going around seeing all of the different aspects and things we can offer. But my sense is we're not getting quite as many people going through it as we could to get the real benefit. Is it that public attitudes need to change, or we need to raise awareness, or we need to kind of have local campaign with GPs?
I think it would be more GPs, you know, because I don't think if GPs are referring patients to the right place, they're not really going to be aware of services that are accessible to them. I mean, I didn't know. I had no idea. I didn't even know the CDC was there. I was like, oh my God, this must be new. But when my GP referred me there, and then obviously everything happened within 2 weeks, yeah, it was great. I definitely say possibly more GPs, because maybe not many people are aware of it, because I wasn't.
And just on that, can I ask you, when your GP suggested going to a clinic rather than to the hospital, did that in any way concern you? Did you sort of question, well, shouldn't I be going to the hospital? Were you entirely relaxed and happy?
No.
It was how the GP explained it to you, but it obviously you didn't have any doubts in your own mind that it wasn't the right place to go.
It might just help out a bit, because I think Emma was referred in the urgent suspected cancer pathway for upper GI.
Yeah.
That comes into the cancer referral office, that's triaged, and the decision was made to proceed with some investigations. The CDC is a satellite unit where we're offering transnatal endoscopy and CT. That work was done before to say that Emma needed the transnatal endoscopy and a CT that was planned on the same day. That's how it was done. So I think it wasn't that Emma just went from primary care colleague straight to the CDC. It was the pathway has been built that way.
that's part of what I was going to touch on, is that actually this pathway is about the initial triage, because one-stop shops can be great, but also what they can do is create over-investigation as well, which we don't want. Not everyone needs absolutely every bit of the investigation, and nor would you want to go through things that you don't need. I think the closing of that loop of that pathway is also really important, is that you don't just go through the investigations, but you get to know the outcomes of that as a patient, and in a way that you know when you're expected to know those outcomes, so you're not left. Because sometimes they can give you the initial of, yes, we know you have a hiatus hernia, but if they took biopsies, when are you going to get that result? Because otherwise that's still, you're in limbo then, IB still, which is not nice. And I think as a trust, that's something that sometimes we're lacking on, that we don't give good pathway explanation of when to expect and what happens if you don't get it in that time. So if you were told someone will contact you about your biopsy in 4 weeks, what if you didn't get that? What are you meant to do as a patient to identify that? And actually I'm a GP, so most patients would then come back to the GP. But then what's the GP going to do? Because it's actually not their biopsy. I think we've got to make sure our pathways don't just start, but they end up being a complete pathway. Gastro is one of the ones that we are doing, and I think still work to do. But there's plenty more we could do. I mean, cardiology is absolutely one of the ones that we could do rapid investigations all in one shot. It would make such a difference to patients, and I know also in primary care it makes such a difference to us, because it would reduce your contact with your GP when you don't need to see them, because you're actually just waiting for your investigations, but you're worried in between, and of course you should be worried because you're not feeling like you. But then we get stuck because we know you're just waiting for the next step, so it's just frustration all round. It's far more efficient. It's just a better service. It just creates, it's that operational steps, isn't it? That, and we need people like SAS to push it forward.
Thank you. Yes, I've got, can I have Caroline? And
Bruce
made your point. Brilliant. Sass, and then we might have to get.
Thanks, Bruce and Caroline. So there's two parts to that answer. First is, I think, Fiona found this inspiring message on LinkedIn about not thinking of it as FDS for people referred on the urgent suspected cancer pathway, but to tell patients that they do not have cancer as quickly as possible. And that includes, of course, the results of the biopsies. And that is the ethos that we're building within the organization. And the second is about demand management. So certainly as a GI surgeon, I'm obsessed with anything from the mouth to the bottom end. There are demand management processes that are being put in place by the national team that I'm also working with in terms of how we work with primary care, what is best to refer, how do we try and have a GP with extended role sitting intermediate between primary and secondary care. What happens when a referral doesn't meet the criteria? When do you actually proceed to a particular investigation? So I think there is a significantly strong light at the end of the tunnel.
Listen, Emma, thank you for coming and sharing your experience with us and letting us hear about it. It's fabulous. And Sats for leading the service, but coming along and supporting Emma as well. And thank you. We appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks very much.
I'm expecting to put some more.
So what have they? Right.
So, we are checking declarations of interest, as we mentioned earlier, we just need to update our declarations of interest for Sue, who has finished her tenure as NED and Vice Chair at NELT, so we will amend that. And Hilary also advised us of her some of the work that her organisation is involved in that she's not, so we will make sure that's as well. Thank you. So, any other declarations of interest today? Okay, so let's move on to the minutes. We had our extraordinary board on the 26th of June and also board meeting 3rd of July. Any comments or any items for amendment? Happy to approve. Thank you. We don't have any current matters arising after those meetings, and we also don't have anything on the action tracker. Just a little bit of an update from me. So nice to be back after the summer. Just over the last couple of months, had some just really useful meetings across the system. We, Matthew and Peter and I met with Jazz one of our local MPs, which was a really constructive meeting. I also met with David Monk from the Pathology Partnership, had a good conversation with him as we're understanding and exploring those options. And also Julian Bradwell from Cooth. They're providing some really interesting services in relation to mental health, and I'm going to connect Matthew with them in terms of support they're providing into acute settings and so on when there's mental health issues going on. There's been understandably a lot of NHS provider and NHS Confed meetings over the last couple of months, all about the changes to NHS, the systems, the changes to ICBs and so on. So all of which we know a lot about, and I think is now starting to play through. And it's just, I think, worth noting as we head into our board meeting, just how much work is coming our way because of all the change going on and the changes to reporting and planning and so on. So just has a capacity issue, I think, on all boards, and just highlights the amount of pressure everyone is operating under just at the moment. Internally, I met with our volunteers, had a really good meeting to hear what some of the work they're doing and to meet a lot of them, very positive, and we're really blessed with a very enthusiastic bunch of volunteers, which is great. I think probably two of my favourite in visits or events over the last couple of months. First of all, the staff graduation, which was absolutely unbelievable. I mean, Kenny did a fabulous job, but just the number of people who have achieved amazing progress for themselves in terms of the training, the development, the qualifications that we've supported them to achieve. It felt amazing. It was a really positive day, and I think they all felt really special. And we had wonderful guest speakers, and we all dressed up in our gowns, and it was a really lovely event. So that was just wonderful, and I really enjoyed that. And then the other one, I was invited to spend a day in surgery with Dick Mukherjee, which I did, and that was absolutely incredible. Seeing our sort of keyhole surgery, and they had me down for an hour or so, but I was there for 4.5 hours. None of it took a break. It was the most unbelievable piece of surgery, so really impressive, and just a really incredible team. And our wonderful state-of-the-art theatres over here. So really enjoyed that. And then just this week, I hosted a visit. We had Ian Jacobs from Chair from Barts and Mary Elford, Chair from Homerton, come and visit. We're each going to visit each other's trusts, given that we're new. And they came here first. And I think actually went away thinking, goodness me, how are they going to beat that? We had a really good visit. We started off over here and they went into ED, which was relatively calm, but it was really interesting how many. We had 10 mental health patients being supported in ED on Tuesday morning while we were there. Just highlighted the level of pressure that the team is under. Nevertheless, it felt very calm. But then we went into the elective hub, and I think they were just so impressed with the level of enthusiasm amongst the team. We met a number of people who were sat in particular and Amilesh. But just talking about the innovative work the teams have been doing, the creation of the elective hub in the first instance, and what a difference it has made to performance and dealing with the volume of work. having a better balance between only doing elective work here and having then fewer elective theatres, but over at Queen's, but not interrupting then our elective activity because we've got sufficient theatre space to carry out our own. It was just really so inspiring. But what I also really took great heart from was the comments they made about how supported they feel by Matthew and the exec to be innovative, to come up with these creative ideas and be given the opportunity to try it, and how it is a continuous learning process. So it certainly gave us great pride, I have to say, in the work that's going on here. And then we took them over to Queen's and walked into A&E in Queen's. Needless to say, they were quite shocked at the number of corridor beds, people being supported in the corridors. It was a particularly busy day. And that was nevertheless very impressed at how calm it felt. Significant pressure, but it felt completely under control. Clara and Ruth showed us around, and it was really wonderful to see how well they were coping despite extreme levels of pressure. We also were able to go and visit ENT and see some of the innovations there in terms of procedures now being carried out in under gentle sedation, but away from theatres, again enhancing our theatre capacity for work that previously would have been done in theatres. And finally, we went into maternity. And again, really impressed at just how smooth the atmosphere is, the environment's clean, fresh, open, relaxing, but the progress that's been made since CQC came in, and the changes that have been made that are really positive, and you can feel it. So I have to say it was an incredibly positive visit. Really enjoyed it, and so much pride from my point of view, but lots of praise for our teams. So which I have passed on, but do thank all of your teams for the. So I think that's it in terms of recent activity. The only thing I would say is just the level of pressure on the trust at the minute. And I'll hand over to Matthew, who'll perhaps give us a little bit of a sense of just how challenging that is. But very happy to pick up as we're going on.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. So first off, there's quite a bit in the report this month. We're really pleased to be shortlisted for Trust of the Year by the HSJ. I think it's a reflection of the huge progress we've made in recent years. There's more detail in the report. We've still clearly got lots to do in terms of our aspirations or ambitions to improve, but whether you're looking at waiting times and turnover and vacancy rates, delivery of savings plans, the staff survey, we're in a much stronger shape than we were actually. And I think that recognition for the hard work that's gone in by so many staff and so many parts of the organisation is great. And the awards are at the end of November, so we should wait and see how that shapes up. But it's great to be on that shortlist with some, I think, very eminent organisations. It's nice to be in that company where we certainly weren't a few years ago. EPR, we're going live with our new electronic patient record and electronic prescribing and the laboratory information management system and a new radiology information system. Basically an entire digital overhaul of the trust. 8th and 9th of November. We're working on that date on the basis that we want to make sure things are absolutely right to go live, given the experiences of other trusts, some of the difficulties about going live. To give us the best chance of getting that through as smoothly as possible, we will be reducing some of our planned care activity for several weeks to allow the systems time to bed in, and we'll be communicating extensively with local communities, with local general practice, etc., to make sure people are aware of the likely impact and will bear with us. Obviously, we can't control the flow through the front door other than by working with the system on a kind of pressure management basis, but we will be encouraging people to bear with us because we know from our rollouts that things slow down, and they slow down for a period of weeks and months in some services as well. So we've plenty of communication on that. And the programme's made some really good strides in the last couple of months. Thanks to Dr. Joe Howard, who's one of our clinical group directors, who stepped in as EPR programme director to really help us with our local clinical and operational engagement. And also Sarah Jensen is the Chief Information Officer at Barts Health. She and her team have been extremely supportive because we're buying the same instance of Millennium as Barts have, and her team have been actively involved in getting us ready for go live. The Chair mentioned the visit to maternity services. We had an unannounced CQC inspection of maternity services last month. And it was a follow-up to previous inspections, and so we were looking at some areas that we've been concerned about before. Their feedback reflected, I think, the hard work that the service have done actually. I think there's some really positive comments on some of the areas that have previously been a concern. And we'll see the report, we think, in October or November. But if the report reflects what we were told on the day, then I think the staff there can be really proud of what we've given them. And it was good to get that done as well, because I think we knew there was someone on the list. So it was I think a bit of a relief for the service, and the staff are actually really pleased to have the opportunity to show the inspectors what they can do, try to improve after the last inspection. On finances, we'll hear a bit more from Mike in due course, but suffice to say our year-to-date deficit in July was larger than it should have been. We've got the impact of the doctor strike and various other factors as well coming into the picture. I mean, at month 4, North East London was around slightly over £20 million off plan. We account for around £6 million of that, and we have put in a financial recovery plan that we hope will close the gap between where we are and where we need to be by the year end. At the minute, we think we're on track for delivering in excess of a 4% CIP, which we know on an NHS basis is a very strong place to be, but we still have around a £9 million gap between our recovery plan and our overall target of £61 million. So we're working hard to try to close that gap, but it is an extremely challenging position, and the board will be keeping a very close eye on that over the course of the winter. The main area we'll have to go after to try to find that extra money is our use of temporary staffing, and so we're keeping a very close focus on that, and Mike will say more about that shortly. And as mentioned last month, we have put in a cash application to NHSE, and we're just waiting to hear. We talk a lot about winter in the NHS, but as the chair has mentioned, we're actually setting records in summer. We had our busiest ever July, 60 patients a day more coming into A&E than last July. Our top 10 record months now for A&E have all been in the last 12 months. So all of our summer and spring months now are busier than any of our historic winter months since comparable records began, which I think is around 2011. So what we are seeing is extremely high levels of pressure on both sides, and that is both in terms of ambulance volume and walk-ins. So the kind of the picture that the chair and our colleagues saw in the emergency department on Monday is reflective of some really extreme pressure on the A&E system at the minute as well. And we are obviously winter planning, but I think volume-wise, as we see at the minute, you know, that May, June, July at the minute look very much like December, January, February did in a year or two ago, and that's the kind of volumes that we're dealing with through the front door just now. And obviously, in the context of the finances and the APR go on, that does put pressure onto the system as well. And finally, just talking about the front door, I just want to say congratulations to PELP, Partnership of East London Cooperatives. They run the urgent treatment centres at both of our hospital sites and also 2 community UTCs here. I have been openly critical of PELP in the past when I joined here, when I think the Type 3 performance was in the 70s. It's now running at a very high 90s rate. And they've been given a good rating, and I think outstandings within their grasp actually in terms of the progress they've made. I just wanted to congratulate Steve Rubery, their chief exec, and all the team there. I think under Steve's leadership, they've made huge strides forward. We've got a really good working relationship with them now as an organisation, and I think as a consequence of the hard work they're doing, we're in a position where literally thousands more patients a month are being seen and treated within 4 hours, which might explain actually some of the increase in attendances at the front door. But HELC have done a brilliant job. I think it's just reward for some very hard work for them to get that good rating. Well done to all.
Yeah. Okay. Any comments or questions for Matthew before we offer me? Good. Right, okay, so let's move on to quality of safety, and we're going on to the Quality Assurance Committee report. Okay.
Thank you, Sarah. So we met in person on the 31st of July. That's the first time we've met in person since I joined. I know it was something, an ambition my predecessor had. We've got that. And the plan is to do that every other month, and to start to combine that, I think, with more business, not least in Malta, it's not here, but, you know, as a maternity safety champion and others. So we're planning ahead. I'm hoping that the next one will be at Barking Community Centre, or the CDC. So that we actually get the opportunity as non-execs to see more. I hope you'll see in the minutes, so not only are they succinct, they're, I think, nicely triangulated with the quality assurance framework. So thank you, Linda and team, for all the really hard work, Kerry, Mackay and others, to enable that to happen. But I think it's really coming through now in the way the meetings are running, and that kind of matching the BAF risks that relate to QAC with things. There were a couple of things. There's one item for escalation, but there were a couple of things I wanted to bring out. One was about learning disabilities. You'll see that quite a lot of work, although that says partial assurance, I think we are on a really good curve towards great improvement, actually. And so not only have we got better service, we did not see very much in the way of harm for patients. You know, things are really improving, but also we're now in a position where we can be training people so that we can get 7-day-a-week cover, because at the moment it works well from Monday to Friday, but I think over time it will definitely work better at the weekends as well. So that was one point. The second, just on this finance stress, just to, you know, there was an outbreak of Bacillus cereus in the pharmacy production unit, which not only causes a lot of work, a lot of investigation, but actually then causes cost, because of course we have to outsource quite a lot of chemotherapy and other things. So again, a cost pressure that the trust does not have the resilience and the deep pockets to tolerate, but no patient harm was identified, unfortunately. Statutory and mandatory training comes up quite a lot, but I think we are going places. Kenya has taken more of that on, and things are now improving. And then the item for escalation, so scrolling down to it, at the start of the year, 4,600 electronic discharge summaries have failed to reach GPs. Reviews have shown that the GPs have now had the information. There have not been any escalations or formal complaints. We do not believe that they were associated with long-term harm, but we now have mitigations in place. So the introduction of the GP alert system to prevent occurrence hopefully will work in the future. Other than that, is there anything that Nick or Andrew want to add?
So just on that last one, on the discharges, is that something that will be covered with the EPR grant? So that it isn't an issue that will happen again?
It was an IT issue
Okay.
that we didn't realise, but we found out within a relatively short time, and sent the discharge summaries out very promptly once we realised they hadn't gone out. And monitored any complaints now.
We're very, one of the things we're really working on at the minute is the benefits around the EPR as well, communicating with people, and we will be in a position soon, as many people across the country are, lots of this will now be in the NHS app. So, and I think, for anyone who's able to access that personally, they'll realise the difference it makes when you're getting these discharge letters on your phone and the hours of being in the hospital rather than actually an antiquated system. So.
Yes, it was quite interesting, the look on the faces of Ian and Mary the other day when we were in the application. Someone walked past with a trolley of files and it was unfamiliar to them because everything was okay. You couldn't have made it out. Okay, thank you. So are we on to the learning from deaths?
Yeah, so the learning from deaths is covered also, it's already been presented at QAC. But routinely comes to our trust board. I'll take it as read. This is generally positive. Our SHIMI and HNSR rates are well within the expected range, and there's nothing really significant. It's of concern raised by this report, and as I say, it's already been through quite a group.
It's quite good to see just the comment from the lead medical examiner about dealing with urgent case deaths over weekends and so on, particularly following the visit you, Nick, and I had where we met with Mohammed Omar and just understanding the significance of that to some of our patient groups. So it's good to see that one.
Yeah, it's working well and relies on people working weekends without having to do so if they understand the local sensitivities.
Good. Thank you. And then we do have a prevention of future deaths report.
Yeah. So again, I'll take it as read. This is an annual report. I've been through QAC as well. I think there are 3 PFDs from the year up to the end of March 2025. But the really good news is, down at the end, is that we've had PFDs since March. So we're on course to hopefully get these this year. We're working really hard with the support of our in-house legal teams. The legal team has moved in-house since last year, and the clinical group triumvirates, making sure that when there are potential PFDs, that they have mitigation that they can present at the coroner's inquest, therefore preventing the PFD from being issued. So generally, if the coroner is satisfied that you recognise the issue and you have mitigation in place to prevent a similar death, then he won't issue a PFD. It will become really well with that. And Sarah Fowler and her colleagues are really good at signalling when they think that's a risk.
Presumably that's all linked into our PISA approach now to learning from incidents.
It is interesting because the don't particularly like the PSEF methodology. They like the old root cause because they want to answer their 4 questions. So to support the coroner, we've now got a parallel system. So we do our IOL3, where we look at significant incidents on Tuesday. But on Monday, I chair a group looks at like coroner's inquest deaths, and we go through those and make sure that we've answered all the 4 questions that the coroner will want answered, and make sure that those have been investigated in a way that the coroner will be satisfied that we've looked at the death in detail. And the coroner is very pleased with that. And there was an article in the Health Service Journal about the general concerns that coroners have about PSERF and how it's not consistent with the way they look at the deaths during an inquest.
Yeah, so that's great, because PSEF is so much broader, so it's general learning from anything that happens, whereas obviously the deaths are much more specific. Okay, thank you. Leslie?
Just 2 things. One, I think having listened to Martha's mum again this morning on the radio, and what would have been her 18th birthday, it's really good just to see that confirmed that we have introduced and rolled out effectively Martha's rule, and it will be interesting to see where it gets moving forward in terms of expansion into maternity, which I know is complex, but I know that's the next step that she's wanting to work. So it's really good to see that in the report. And the second bit, in the introduction, you talk about, and in the report, it talks about issues with weekend learning disability nursing. And yet I couldn't see anything in the report that talked about what actions we were taking in relation to addressing those issues that have come up.
Firstly, on Martha's role, we've rolled it out. And we've actually published a summary today that was sent around by email to colleagues as it's the anniversary of the death of Martha. The thing I find interesting about Martha's role is it doesn't include paediatric patients, and it's a paediatric patient triggered the whole process. So I think the real change will be when it includes peds as well, because I think that's what Martha's parents really want. As regards the learning disability issue, I don't think any trust that we were able to contact have a weekend, so 24/7 disability nurse cover, because it's such a specialised area. So at the moment, it's hard to see how we would have to cover, maybe the way that we look at that is by providing training to our nursing teams in all areas, so they understand what's required. There's part of our mandatory strategy training is understanding and doing the appropriate and I think that has led to increased understanding and awareness amongst the staff on the wards in relation to learning disabilities. So that hopefully means that we'll have less issues. And first thing on Monday morning, disability team on there specific.
So there's additional nurses there, isn't there, as well? So there's two nurses that are learning disability nurses, but they're not being employed as learning disability nurses. It's core nursing.
Yes.
But they will also be doing shifts on the weekends as part of their just rota.
Yeah, they're in the establishment, so what they've done is they've recruited into 2 of the vacancies. They've had an ED, and the idea is that will give them just more robust cover for the weekend. But they're not, as you say, specifically recruited to do LD
I think the other important thing about that is it's going to change, I hope, some of the culture of we can't just give this to the learning disability team, but actually it needs to be in the establishment and that they need to recognise that. I think the other thing that hopefully will happen with more learning disability patients is because they get prioritised on the waiting list, that their chance of coming to ED would hopefully be less, and they would have electives coming in rather than going through the acute pathway, and that will always be at times that the learning disability team will run.
But hopefully all of our nursing staff have done a lot of McGowan training and we can provide additional training so they are better able to support all of our patients with learning disabilities as well. Good. Thank you. Okay, shall we move on? I guess the integrated heritage sector. It's such an exciting.
Well, I'll take the report as read. I just wanted to pull out a couple of key aspects. And one that we've decided not to measure, which is in line actually with the kind of farm-free care metrics, falls month by month, comparing the month on month. We're actually going to look at falls each month and actually look at falls with harm. Rather than comparing, because there's so many variables in month that it just becomes really difficult to triangulate. So the key focus will be looking at falls with harm, and I'm pleased to say in July there was no falls with harm. The other thing that we've included in this report, which you won't have seen before, is where we're at with our ward accreditation framework and the journey that we've been on to get our wards bronze, silver and gold. We've been really successful, thanks to Mike and Fiona's support at digitalising the ward accreditation framework. So this will be easier to provide monthly data on where our inpatient wards are at, rather than just having a snapshot in a moment in time. So this will give us rich quality and safety information. So huge thank you for the support with that. And then the other thing, which we've talked a bit about, is improvements in maternity. We are seeing that coming through our friends and family feedback. And we're seeing improvements in antenatal care, labour care, and that's where we know we've invested and put some resource in. So it's actually having a benefit to the women and the
Thank you.
So falls, I agree. I don't think very much is helpful. I think the thing I always feel is missing is a fall and then what? So if there's harm, obviously you have a fall, but it's that part of the Swiss cheese of looking back to why the fall happened, also what you're going to do about the fact that they had the fall, and did they have then the onward referrals into the falls team, which is now part of the St George's thing. So I feel like we just need to, a bit better, because it could be the same patient that's having multiple falls, and that's a bigger problem than, well, potentially, than lots of different people having falls, but we don't want them to keep having falls recurrently. Equally, it could just be a patient that through no fault of anyone just has falls. And there's sometimes not a lot you can do about it. So falls on its own, I don't find it helpful. So if the loop could be closed, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I think it is really valuable because obviously it's often one patient, it's not necessarily, these are all different falls. And also in these categories, like slip or a trip as well. So just really breaking it down. So I'm happy to take that away and make sure we just provide the data.
About Caroline. Firstly then, Sue, Caroline.
I think building on Ruth's point there as well, because so often, particularly in older patients, a fall will be a precursor to something else. My mother-in-law had a series of falls recently, then had a stroke. So I think it would be interesting to sort of link up with some of the wider work. Devesh was doing some work with primary care around this as well. Are there other low cost? Are there other tests that could be done at the same, or is there other data at the time looking at what other presentations are there? Having 6 months for a year.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the report and the sort of candid and transparency of it. It's really helpful. So it gives us lots of assurance. I was wondering, because Nick, you've worked in a place where they've got APR. So looking ahead, once it's embedded in and we've got over the difficulties and we know that rollout often brings, what sort of additional quality and safety measures do you think this will give us in terms of first as a board, but more importantly, from a patient's point of view, how will they benefit from EPR in terms of quality and safety?
I think,
Just at high level.
yeah, I think it picks up on Caroline's point. It's much easier than to do that triangulation if it's on a digital system. And then you've got your record of, you know, the fall, and then people can, if they see the points of that into consideration. And also it warns staff of the patients at falls risk in advance, so you can make the necessary precautions. So yeah, it definitely helps.
Leslie.
It was just a question about mandatory training, because I know we've done a lot of work as a trust. Kenya's done a lot of work to kind of really getting to grips with statutory mandatory training. But the compliance levels probably still on where you would want them to be, and I wondered if there are any particular issues in particular areas around that training.
We may want to pick that one up.
So it's clearly an ongoing issue with it. There's a big bit of work that Kenya has been leading on, which is almost a completion phase. So I can make sure that the areas that we're asking for some training are relevant and appropriate to the modules that they do, because it's mainly online, are excellent. We'll also review face-to-face ones. So we're trying to reduce the number of unnecessary modules that people are asked to do. We're trying to make sure that those who've done them elsewhere and one of the licenses that NHS is encouraged, so that people don't have to repeat stuff they've done before. And we're working, particularly in medics, to make sure that they keep up to date with it.
Thank you. Nick, thank you for the report. We always end up focusing on the negatives, don't we? Because you've highlighted the things that we need to do something about. I wanted to pick up on the duty of candour compliance. I suspect the numbers are relatively low and therefore the percentages look quite stark. However, 50% performance against a target of 100, I find a bit concerning. That this should be like breathing, shouldn't it? So what are we doing to make sure that we're more compliant in that space?
Duty of candour.
Duty of candour. Again, the duty of candour is a difficult one. It's, our understanding is that probably the duty of candour takes place, but it's not recorded. So when anything goes wrong, people are tending to be transparent with relatives to let them know, or the patient, but they're not recording it in the way that they should at a later date. So it comes up as being 50% rather than much higher. So it's something that we need to make sure people go through the process and recording when they're because often what's happened is they've told the patient or the family what's happened, they then go home. It's a day they should be contacting them again and asking them to sure that it's recorded, which is, I think, which is where the problem lies.
So in the because that caught my attention in the report, because it's alarming on the front to see a performance of 50%, but it was 3 out of 6. So the numbers are low. In that occasion were particularly low. So I think we need to help ourselves in terms of not providing unduly alarming headline figures on our exec summaries that possibly give more concern than might be necessary. You're right, 50% is never a good figure.
Yeah,
But in low numbers is a slight issue there, because we're at a small number of letters.
I just wanted to hear what we were doing systematically to ensure that we've identified why it's happening, or we think we've identified why it's happening, what we put in place to avoid future.
And then I just had one, so there was also a mention of an increased number of hospital-acquired pressure ulcers, but also some short staffing on the tissue viability nursing. So I just wonder whether that's an issue that's being addressed, and there's both the creation of the people developing those ulcers in the first instance, but also have we got to start with the
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, this is an area of focus. I should have probably pulled that out. In fact, on Tuesday, we've got a pressure ulcer audit and a kind of refocus around training and education, where we're looking actually our patients on the right mattress they should be on, and people who are on a pressure relieving mattress, should they be on it or should they be off it now? So we're looking at that, and we're also looking at some further training within our ED department and geriatrics. We do have a shortage in tissue viability nurses. However, going back to what we described in learning disabilities, we want to empower the nurses who are delivering the care to actually have the skills to be able to do the assessment of the patients and take the appropriate action, because it doesn't all need to sit within specialised nursing. So there is something about where we can put that power. It would be unfair to my nursing colleagues not to call out how challenging it is sometimes providing care in the corridor. And although we've put lots of mitigations in place to make sure that it's safe, and there are times when it's particularly challenging in terms of being able to do the skin assessments and ensuring there's the right level of privacy and dignity. So to be fair to colleagues working under pressure, that can be challenging at times too. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, thank you for that. Let's move on to people options. So Leslie, we need to take us to the PCC report.
Yeah, and it's a verbal report because we met on Monday, so we haven't got anything written down, given the papers had already gone out, but there are a number of reports that appear on the agenda anyway, so I won't touch on those because we've got the revalidation, medical education, training survey, staff survey update, and the Res and WDES, and the workforce appears on FIC. So don't need to cover any of those because a lot of what we talked about appears on the agenda anyway. Just two things I perhaps wanted to highlight. One was the work that's been done on the People Promise programme, where I think over the past 12 months, and Janine spoke earlier in the private board meeting, so sort of not quite an aside, but on an issue about just that changing culture that is happening in the organisation and how significant that is and how important that is to what we're doing. And so some of the work in the People Promise programme about flexible working, about retention, about how we accommodate and continue to employ people who have disabilities by making adaptations, and a whole range of things like that has been really important in getting us to where we are over the past 12 months. And the role is ending due to funding, but just to place on record, so as we did at PCC, our thanks to Debbie, who's led that work and done a really good job over the past 12 months. And the second thing I wanted to highlight was the update that we had on the violence and aggression programme, because that is a very real issue still for us. It's still shocking, the number of our staff that are subject to violence and aggressive behaviour by members of the public, by patients, families. It's often in areas where we wouldn't think, you kind of think, we're ED, that's the kind of place where things like this happen. But actually it's areas like CT scanning, maternity. So scanning, it's if people turn up and they can't get a female person to scan, then very often family members get very angry. Maternity, it's sometimes you get, I think that would be a nice time. Actually, people do get quite stressed in maternity. So a lot of our staff are still suffering from amounts of violence and aggression that they should not suffer from. And that's common across the NHS. It isn't unique to us by any means. But what we are doing now is reviewing and revisiting, if you like, our violence and aggression strategy and plan so that that will come forward again. It's a big whole. It isn't just the mental health issues that we've talked about before and the substance misuse, but there are a range of settings. You'd be surprised how much violence and aggression happens in car parks. So there's a whole range of, well, perhaps you wouldn't be, but when you try and find a parking space in Queens, there's a whole range of settings where staff, not just our nursing staff, but our staff are subject to that. So I think it is a really important issue that we keep across, and we get quarterly updates. I think with the sort of nirvana that's going to happen when EPR is here, But with EPR, that will help us better in terms of tracking patients so that people can be forewarned if patients are coming in so that they can actually make sure that they have the necessary support in place if we know, because at the moment it requires someone to put a note on the paper card which then gets wheeled on the trolley, which doesn't always get picked up. So I think it's just a really important issue that we keep sight of. And just to say that we are reviewing the policy and updating the policy at the moment. And the only other quick thing, as Andrew mentioned, is the amazing work that Kenya has been doing on mandatory training to try and make that much more streamlined, so people are being trained what they need to be trained on rather than other things, and they can passport their training with.
Thank you. Right, okay, well, let's go on and look at the individual reports then. So, Janine, the equality standard reports.
Yes, so this is a pulling together of what previously would have been brought as 3 separate reports. This is the Workforce Race Equality Standard, the Workforce Disability Equality Standard, and the Equality Delivery System Assessment. So we're bringing it together because they're all interconnected. I will take the paper as read, and in the spirit of celebrating our successes, we do need to call out some of the achievements that we previously touched on in terms of the impact of us focusing on our culture, translating to lower vacancy rates, lower turnover, and the associated benefits that brings for staff and patients. These reports, however, do show some areas of concern. So Leslie's already touched a bit on the harassment data, and that does tie in with our violence and aggression programme. So that work is continuing. And part of that will be a relaunch of our comms campaign to focus in on specific examples of the most prevalent types of violence and aggression that our staff face. The other area that we are focusing on is, and continue to focus on, is around recruitment and what we can do to close and reduce that relative likelihood to be appointed after shortlisting, which I know we're not alone in facing as part of the NHS, but I think given our demographics and our role as an anchor employer, we're putting particular focus on. And then the final element I do want to call out, which is interesting because it shows, the data shows for our disability equality standard that our staff who've told us that they have a disability are more likely to be engaged than the national average. However, I remain concerned about our disclosure rates, particularly at more senior levels, because that's at about 7%. That is a 3% improvement on where we were, but it still represents a gap on where we would expect to be given the national average of people who have a disability, which is at about 15%.
So any, yeah.
Quick disability question. So I feel there's a mismatch between what people consider to be a disability and legally what's considered to be a disability. And also, do they want, I think there's also a difference between feeling comfortable sharing that with an employer, or they just don't want to, and then that's absolutely their choice as well. If you kind of got a gauge of how much those issues are affecting us as an organisation, because we don't want to force people to disclose something if actually that's not what they want to disclose, or they just don't see it as a disability, even if legally you would.
Yeah.
Sure. So in terms of, you're absolutely right. And so the journey that we've gone on has got us from below 4% to the 7%, has been focused on removing those barriers to people disclosing. And so we do have a role that is committed to helping with reasonable adjustments, for example, and trying to break down some of those barriers. But the reason I call out that gap is because I remain concerned, have we done enough to make sure that we have the support that staff need in place? And so we're thinking about sickness absence. What are the drivers around sickness absence? Could it be that they haven't disclosed, they need additional support, and so we're not able to meet them where they are? And so one of the things that we'll be looking to do, Ruth, is that and we'll talk a bit about this when we come to the staff survey element, but we're looking at bringing in an automatic referral to occupational health for once you hit a certain threshold of numbers of sickness absence states, so we can start to think about being more proactive in the space.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, just a small point around recruitment. So on our recruitment and sort of different trajectories, etc., we know that we've achieved made significant progress on certain underrepresented groups across the organisation in clinical services, nursing as well, but more to do on nursing. But in terms of the sort of strategic managerials, not just at board level, but below board level. And we have some data around that, because anecdotally, I feel that those in the middle of the organisation aren't representative of the communities that we serve. And it's often those who are making decisions around strategy, direction and priorities. And whereas the clinicians, where they are good representatives of the global majorities, are implementers, as opposed to not always setting priorities there. So it'd be helpful to get some data around that, perhaps at ECC, and then back to here to close that gap.
So this is an area that we are very concerned about in thinking about our talent pipeline and how we take an active approach to identifying, growing and encouraging talent through the organisation. Yeah. And so as part of my team restructure, one of the roles that I will be introducing will be a focused talent management role. And that would be an expectation of that role that we will be more actively able to track and ensure that we're seeing that representation through. Because the GES data does call that out in terms of when we think about representation, that there is that variation.
A quick one, and a shout out at PCC on Monday. Nikki, can't remember her surname, but she presented around recruitment, retention, pipelines, etc. I think she was brilliant. Really good reflection. She said afterwards, a real good recruitment into the organisation.
Much good. You're actually asking us to approve for these reports to be posted on the website, is it? Yeah. People happy with that. Good. Thank you. You have your approval. So, the revalidation and statement.
This is a statutory requirement. You need to submit a report to NHS on an annual basis. I think it's relatively straightforward, so I'll take it as read. We need to approve it, and then Matthew needs to sign it, and it gets submitted to NHS England next month.
Thank you. So again, this is partly my ignorance. I did a fair bit of Google searching to understand the revalidation process and whether I should be concerned about numbers, because I didn't have any context. I'm assuming this is a fairly normal state of affairs, and that having 81 deferred is not unusual, and it's paperwork and it will be tidied up and it will all be sorted, but there's nothing of concern in relation to.
We're a designated body. We have about 1,000 doctors linked to our designated body, about half of whom consult. Sort of locally employed doctors, as well as some of our bank doctors, who do a certain number of bank sessions, which is a relatively new innovation for us. And then each has to do a minimum number of appraisals to a high standard over a cycle of 5 years to be revalidated. Now we have a team of deputy RO plus 2 administrative support people who constantly are nagging people to do their appraisals. And a significant number, usually just 3 months, because they're just not up to date with the paperwork. The most common issue is they haven't done what's called a patient survey, so then have to ask a certain number of patients to fill in a handwritten sheet, and then that gets submitted to a company that provides us with our appraisal software. And they also have to do a 360 colleagues. So those are the 2 things that they don't get round to doing. You have to nag them, them most often for 3 months, and most of them will then go through it. A tiny number are recurrent deferrals, and if they have to do, once they get to a 3rd deferral, the GMC contacts us, and then at that point I often get involved. And but it's a really small number, and we haven't had to refer anyone because of failure to engage as a GMC formal referral, certainly since I've been doing this for the last 18 months, and I don't think that's been done for quite some time. So we get them all through in the end.
So it's not, they don't get struck off or they don't lose their right to practice.
They completely disappear. Desperately try to find a way to come into the page.
Okay, no, that's really helpful for understanding. Thank you very much. So you're asking us to approve the form to be submitted. You're satisfied with it. We don't have anything to be concerned about. And those referrals will be managed and it'll be dealt with in time. So is everyone happy to support for the paper to be submitted for the report? Thank you. Okay. Good. And we're still with you on the National Training Survey.
So once a year, there's a 3-month period where GMC asks trainees to 6-month period where GMC asks trainees feedback on their training experience in which trust that they're working at, and this is the result of this year's training survey. Perhaps a little disappointing compared to last year. There were some areas of particular concern, primarily at King George, where we will have some visits. We have to do self-assessment, submit on 11 areas, and then we have some areas that were extremely good, particularly how neurosurgeons got stand and small range. So there's plenty of work going on to mitigate the many concerns. To look at how we can improve for next year.
So the clinical leads and the medical education leads are all aware, and you're engaging with them in terms of the work we now need to do to tidy that up.
I joined a meeting about it from the break between public and private workshops going.
Great, thank you.
We've also had a national letter on the interventions to improve the experience of doctors, the resident doctors as well. So we'll be so there's a lot of movement on this space.
Thank you. Leslie.
One of the visits around Foundation Medicine here was in August. So I wonder.
Yes, we had a visit. So it was a visit last week. We clarified the situation. It went well, but we need to show them it's improved. They'll be going to trainees later in October. Trainees have only just swapped, so we have every opportunity to make sure our trainees are well looked after and supported.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you. It's really great to see the areas that have made good progress. I was just wondering if there is anything to be learnt from how they've done that and what they've done differently that could then apply to the other areas. Are we taking those lessons across?
Absolutely. So, for instance, the improvement in anaesthetic training, anaesthetic department trainees under GMC scrutiny for a very long time has been based on some really enthusiastic consultants taking on the tutor's role. They produced something called the Breathe program, and they did a fantastic induction that Matthew took part in August, and we'll learn from them how neurosurgeons are just incredibly engaged with their trainees. I think the real important key to this is consultants understanding their role in supporting trainees and making sure they get a really good experience and they come away from a year. I think the time here is really benefiting from the amazing group of patients that we have coming through the front door and related patients. And there's every reason that trainees should want to come to BHR, and what we want in the long term is they have such a positive experience by those years to come.
So, I mean, the anaesthetic training program, I mean, they're setting themselves very high aspirations in terms of what they want to benchmark nationally. I think what's really interesting is the consultants leading that are relatively recently trainees here as well. They've come here and who are still very much in touch with the experience of the resident doctors in training. And what they have is that right combination of aspiration, leadership skills. They've got the empathy for the experience of the people that are training with. They know what made it a good experience for them here, but they also know where the shortcomings were as well. And with so much of this, it comes down to leadership. And it's not that you have to be recently qualified to do the job well. And we've got some extremely experienced consultants also do a fantastic job. You know, Andrew, with his medical director here at KGH, you can see in the data the impact. But so much of it comes down to people who really get what's involved in it, you know, and it's a combination of leadership skills with the right kind of process. And it takes all of it. So one of the great things about this trust is if what you want to do is a lot of clinical work, you will get a lot of clinical work. Yeah. One of the consequences of us being relatively light on resources is it does give people actually a lot of scope to practice, and we hear that in specialty after specialty. People who come here, if you like the pace of the work, you know, it'll be great for you. And what we need to make sure is that in all the more areas, we've got the right wraparound of support.
The reality is many of our young consultants trained here at some point.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know, I keep finding that as I go around and they're telling me that they trained here and they've sort of been away and come back and, you know, consciously choosing to come back and spend their careers here and then really proud and passing on the learning. You know, there's a really thriving excitement amongst those who are teaching the next generation what you can develop.
With the likes of Ankit and I as well, I think they're both first medics in their family as well, as well. And so they've grown up with, and they've got a really strong attachment actually to this part of London and a really strong desire to contribute to that as well. And I think that kind of
familiar.
Yes. But I think that gives you that kind of huge commitment to doing well. And actually, I mean, they'd be two people it'd be really good from the board to hear from at some point, actually, because I think that the kind of people you talk to and you think the service actually in many ways has a really bright future if we've got people like that coming through the ranks once, especially in the organisation, because, you know, they've kind of dozens and dozens of younger doctors, nurses, therapists, etc., operations folk, finance, who are in that position within the streets.
I think Peter was observing better our group of applicants for consultant jobs is now than it was maybe 5 years ago.
No. It's really significantly different.
Institution, really good to hear. Thank you. Okay, thank you for that one. Were you putting your hand up? No. Janine, staff survey.
Yes, so I think this builds on the cultural transformation journey that we are on. I'll take the paper as read. The key highlights from this is that last year we hit 55%, so I smashed the target that Matthew had set, and I'm nothing is not ambitious, and we've now set ourselves targets that we've raised it, why not? And so this year we are looking to launch the staff survey on the 22nd of September, so we're going early, and that's in recognition of the fact that we will be in the midst of EPR launch at the normal staff survey closure date, and so we're going to go a bit early. This paper speaks to the work that we've been doing for the last year to respond to the truly representative feedback from our staff, in particular thinking around well-being. So moving to a place of supporting staff with taking responsibility for their well-being. This is a multi-year programme of work, and so over the last year we've been focused on making sure people take their annual leave. That's really important to stay well. Thinking about our psychological support service. So we're one of the only trusts that actually has, and we're not a mental health trust, but we employ our own psychologists who provide not only triaging services, but actual therapy to our staff as well. And that's been really transformative, but also a rich seam of information and data about what we can be doing to be more active in supporting our staff. Flowing on from that, the just and restorative culture, so thinking about how we address violence and aggression, thinking more actively about how we put in place rapid interventions. So, for example, we now have panels, pre-panels, when staff raise a grievance or concern, they'll go very quickly to a panel that's chaired by Fiona's deputy Max, that will quickly look at, are there alternative ways of addressing these issues? And then thinking about what staff have told us in terms of access to progression and recruitment. So we're continuing, wonderful to the recognition of Nick. She's a woman of real vision in this space. And so we're working to continue to do more to ensure that when you join BHIET, you're not just taking a job, it's the next step in actually a really active career, and apprenticeships will play their role there, and maintaining our main provider status. So the ask is for of the board is to get that update about what we've been doing, and the fact that we'll be launching on the 22nd of September. Get out there, spread the word. We'll be very active again. If you fill in the survey, get a free cup of coffee or drink of your choice through a Costa voucher. And we'll also be piggybacking with the flu rollout program as well this year, which we'll be doing something from the canteen. So you actually get a free breakfast in return for kind of get a jab, get something to eat. Fill in your survey, get something to drink.
And obviously doing as much as we can to help people who don't have easy access to the means or the time to fill in the survey. And that's often a barrier for people.
So this year we're taking a different approach. So last year our hypothesis was that we needed to do more paper surveys. But what we found as a kind of after action review was actually just blanket more paper surveys didn't actually make very much difference. And those staff in areas that we had approached with paper survey have said this year that rather than that, they want us to be more active in turning up with iPads and enabling them to fill it out. And given our improvements in Wi-Fi, we can do that this year. And so what we will be doing is only posting out paper copies to people who are on long-term sick or who are unable to access in other ways. Key point there as well, is those surveys will not be sent by us. We will not be touching that paper process at all this year. Our provider picker will be sending it direct. So that should hopefully provide some more assurance to those members of staff. Great, thank you.
Okay. I was kind of slightly worried at one point that Janine was about to say you got a free blue jack if you filled out. But I was thinking, I'm not filling it in. I think I was really pleased to see, given the discussion we were having earlier on about sickness and supporting staff, is page 6 of the report where it talks about, Ginny mentioned earlier, it's an automated process where there's an automatic referral rather than relying on managers remembering to refer people, together with the pilot GP service for staff, which I think will mean that people can get a same day digital appointment. And then particularly that link from occupational health, not just being about the restorative, but so you're not just intervening when people are ill, but in response to what we were told last year in the South survey, developing those preventative interventions. So that thing like loneliness and navigating change and things like that. So I think it's a really good move forward in terms of trying to, in general, what the health system is supposed to be doing is shifting through prevention. So it's really good to see that the way we're using our occupational health is about trying to shift towards that. So we're supporting people so hopefully they don't get stressed or burnt out or feel that loneliness and things like that. So I think that move to a preventative approach is really to be welcome.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for your report. Really good to read the progress that's been made. At section 6.3, you've asked us for suggestions to inform the engagement plan. So I just wondering that on the back of this report, that piece of comms is done, so that it shows what progress has been made, etc. Just pulls it all together for the last year, and sort of a precursor to the launch of the next one. So this is what was achieved in 24-25, and based on that, 26-27 stuff, get involved because you can make a difference. And some examples, some case studies, really, about what difference from staff saying that it has made a difference to their work life here.
Yeah.
you want me to respond?
Sure. Yeah, so I think we've been really, I think the thing I've been most proud of actually this year is how active we have been in the You Said We Did, and we've worked really closely with comms colleagues, our screensavers. So we had a wonderful example from here at KGH of staff members sharing that they felt that inappropriate signage or signage that wasn't clear enough was actually connected to some of the violence that they were receiving. And so we had Laura, our violence and aggression lead, we had her grinning in front of a new sign as an example of You Said We Did, that was a lovely screensaver. So we've been really active in changing that very regularly. But I know the team are planning as part of the launch to do a kind of bringing it all together and celebrating all the examples of You Said We Did.
Thank you. Two things. One, a suggestion. I don't know when our next board visits are going to happen, but maybe we could include promoting it as part of that visit specifically, since you asked suggestions. And then my second point, a proportion of our workforce aren't actually employed by us, but are key to the operation of our hospitals. And obviously their employer will have responsibilities with regards to how they're feeling, but that is sort of part of the knowledge base that we need to manage our hospitals more effectively and efficiently and make sure our staff are happy. So I wasn't sure how we work together with those suppliers to make sure that we're getting the whole picture.
So in terms of the suppliers, I think there's more that we could be doing with Mighty and Sodexo in particular.
Yeah.
So I'd be happy to take that one away and love the idea of us using the visit to drum up. And if we're there long enough, we can hand out some iPads as well.
We have an hour.
Yeah, I'm not sure this is going to add a lot of value, but I guess you're already talking about that. I was thinking, what's the cost of this incentive? And, you know, are we working with the charity, for example, or there are other potential partners that might support us on some of this?
I think that would be it would be a great idea if we could get some external funding, but I think we're investing in this, in the coffees, and get the disclosure rate up, because we believe that actually there is a cost avoidance further down the track.
Yeah.
So it means that it essentially pays for itself. But yeah, but we are paying for the coffees.
Thank you. Right, I think that brings us on to finance and so let's start with the finance, investment and performance committee report.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Take the report as read. So just make a few comments on the finance section. £60 million of recurrent savings being delivered over the last 2 years. We've made the largest reduction in agency costs of any NHS trust, and a big focus now on bank. And that whilst there remains a £20 million gap, there is a real focus on reducing that gap, but also on quality and safety as well. So it's not going to be savings at the any implications on the safety of our workers. And just to put it into context as well, with all those financial savings were made at the same time as we improved our operational performance as well. So on the operational performance side, diagnostics consistently in the highest ranking for the last 14 months, UEC performance, the third best in London, and other areas improving and continue to improve, for example, RTT and the 20-day faster cancer performances as well. We will continue to, at Finance Committee, receive monthly CIP updates. We've got a new head of PMO who started recently. Plus also we've got planned deep dives into the areas, particularly around staffing, where we want to make more progress, including the non-clinical staffing area, where there has been a 20% increase in staffing over the last couple of years. On EPR, we will get assurance around progress against that, but more importantly, what we're looking at is reviewing the benefits realisation case around productivity, safety, and the financial savings around that. The last comment, I guess, to make is around the framing of all of this. It's happening, as you said, Chair, and Matthew at the start of the meeting, in the context of the hospital being its busiest ever, at the same time as huge national changes and regional changes with the ICB reconfiguring its role, and at the same time as ensuring that we're delivering EPI finance and continuing to keep the day job going. So the previous report is a good example about the focus on culture, and it shows that we've got to keep the focus on all the things that make this hospital a place of continuous improvement.
Thank you very much. Absolutely right. Really good to get that summary, and really helpful picking out the key points there. Any comments? Anything, Mike, you want to say at this point on the? All right. Well, let's go into the detailed reports as we need. So, Matthew, the annual goals report.
So folks, this does come to us periodically just to check who we were doing, and I don't want to run over too much of the stuff that's going to appear in the integrated performance report. But this just brings us up to speed with the progress that we made. But you'll remember that we rolled forward from last year to keep us consistent with what we're trying to do. And what you've got in there is the spread across the different areas of access, quality, finance, etc. I think most of which has been picked up through previous updates to here. So I suggest that people have got specific questions about any of this, happy to take them. I don't imagine that we'll be looking at much change actually, because I think these are become pretty good consistent in triangulating like problems.
It's been seen in detail. Any comments or questions from the team?
It's not so much a question, just a comment, really. I find this a really, really good, useful report. It's neat, it's tidy, it's short sentences. I think it's very digestible. And it shows us very clearly where we have had success, which we must celebrate, I think, as a board and applaud, but also where we need to put in more focus. So thank you, whoever pulled it together. Good work.
Yeah.
Thanks, name. I think Russell does that.
Yeah, Russell.
Let's give Russell.
He's done a very good job on this stuff. So yeah.
Well done. And then we're on to the green plan. Yeah, read it, Mr. Lemon.
Thank you. It's a three to 4 year report, forward plan on our green strategy. It re-emphasises our commitment as an organisation to reducing our carbon footprint, to educating and training our staff around waste, and also talked to some of the things Janine often mentions around anchor organisation and what our role is in our community. There's a huge amount of work going on. We tend to approach this work either by working with partners. We don't want to reinvent the wheel on a green plan. We all are doing the same thing, certainly as hospitals. And so the report describes how we are working collaboratively with BARTS, how we're working as part of the North East London system, and more recently how we've partnered up with UCLH, who have an excellent track record in delivering the green strategy. So there's a number of initiatives described within. Very small areas like replacing the lighting and doing lots of things around estates and facilities, particularly around heating and boilers and waste. The travel plan, which supports our staff, which encourages people to use public transport and find alternative ways to work. Although our double-storey, 3-layer public car park at Queen's does not suggest we're doing particularly successful at that. But nonetheless, a range of activities that we are undertaking to support staff and patients and generally the environment. It does link in very nicely to our local boroughs as well. So We will hear more about this as we go forward. I know hot off the press that we have submitted a bid for solar panel funding at King George's, which talks to the carbon footprint, talks to the sustainability around energy, and amazingly also saves some money. Thank you.
Thank you. And this is one you're asking us to approve, although I think it's came to committee in August. So, happy to approve.
Raise, so I know it says it's outside of the scope, which is patient visited travel. But as an anchor institution, we should be thinking about that as well. And I suspect it is vast compared to many of the other components that we have direct or indirect control over. So I get that the plan doesn't cover it. I guess I'm just putting out a plea that says, how can we look at that to do something, because it would make a difference to the environments that we occupy and therefore the citizens that we serve.
At committee, there were, and got with two comments. I don't think one was around staff engagement. I think it was the trust that was highlighted where you've got staff workplace green champion around that, and then also looking at how you link the green agenda to the cost of living agenda as well for our staff, so that it becomes something that is motivated other than beyond the idea of having, which is a great idea, having a reduced carbon footprint, but having people spend less on cost of living. So there were other trusts who were sort of looked at the agenda, and we've done it in certain times, haven't we? We've had events here and at Queen's where we've helped to reduce and recycle and upcycle and reuse items, school uniforms, etc. So it's about just thinking more creatively about those opportunities.
Thank you. Ruth.
I wonder if with the public transport thing, I think there is certainly a reticence because I think it's felt to be complicated by our public and they don't know which buses go where and where they get dropped off. And actually, we're not good in the hospital for promoting it. So elsewhere you sit at a bus stop and it tells you when the next bus is and where it's going to, but there's nothing in the hospital to suggest, oh, by the way, there's a bus in 3 minutes that's going this way, or any interactive map. And I just wonder if it's something also the charity would get behind as a technical piece that could be in a few different places in the hospital of an interactive map. Or screens that would say, these are the services running, these are the trains that are going, because it would all link with TfL, so it's not our software, it would be their software.
Really good point, actually, Ruth. Sorry, but interestingly, within this work, there are still pockets of money available. You know, you can bid for small money to facilitate different things. And, as I said, with the solar panels, I mean, that's a big piece of bidding with a huge, financial sum associated with it. But even in the world that we're living in with regard to financial concerns, that these are initiative-driven tasks, and I think we will probably do very well to put lots and lots of small bids into different initiatives and get some of this moving. As a hospital, one of the biggest areas we can educate our staff is around waste that they use every day, putting non-recyclable things down the toilet, all of those very basic things that we've got used to doing domestically at home. We think very carefully about our rubbish. Once you're at work, everything goes in the bin. And so there's so many layers that this is interesting and there's lots and lots of work to do. But I think one of the important things to mention is that the requirement for this to come to the board for approval is everybody's attempt at making sure it's current and it's relevant and that we are doing the best we can in regards to delivering against this strategy. Thank you.
We did quite a bit of work through Haver in place around the obesity strategy for Havering as well. You know, Havering's got a particular issue around, it's got the highest car usage in London, and also the highest rates of obesity in London. And I think it's, you know, what is interesting, I mean, I don't have to spend all my day on my feet, but we do have significant numbers of staff who do take transport from the train stations, for example, which I suspect after a 12-hour shift is probably entirely reasonable, actually. But there's things about thinking about how we work with support staff to use, as well as patients to use some of the public transport alternatives. Folk remember around a year ago we shut the car park for the whole summer, which was
Just for the sake of it.
well,
No.
that's it. And you know, there was predictions of dire consequences of it. It actually ran so well that the council said they wouldn't support us with increasing our car parking spaces because the site ran perfectly well with 1,000 fewer car parking spaces. I think we probably was 1,200 spaces. We've probably got more car parking at Queen's than any other hospital in London. And I think there's something, if you go to the Royal London, 0, you know. So I think there's something about us thinking about recognising local infrastructure, also with other sites like St George's. How do we maximise the public transport links to places like that? You get the best of both worlds at something like Barking Community Hospital, where you've got a train station right on the doorstep, actually tremendously accessible. So I think the Trust Green strategy, we have to work with our place leadership teams to understand how we build that in some broader public health strategies and encourage people. Sometimes actually 20 minutes walking is not a bad thing to do. Well, as I say, if I was on my feet for 12 hours a night.
And the reason I raised it is really to say, can we have less trips?
Yeah.
For patients. I mean, visitors will visit if somebody's here in a bed. But yeah.
Talked to the one-stop CDC, you
Yeah.
have out your scans on the same day.
Yeah, patient transformation would reduce the number of trips.
Yes, one more thing. Just on the kind of TfL links, I think, you know, what would be nice if we as an NHS linked up a bit more with TfL, because it's expensive. People don't get on the train because it's expensive. Commuting to Romford, some of us come quite a long way, and it is a prohibitive cost in some parts of our staff groups would find the cost of a daily trip into Romford and back on the train would be too much. And one of the things we could look to do is try and get the mayor and the TfL team to sort of think about discounted and do season ticket loans, but that's a bit old hat now.
In the way that students in London get a much cheaper Oyster card.
For our patients, the ones that are using it a lot, they get freedom passes at 60, which means it's free. And again.
After 9,
After 9, yeah. After 9.
She's a freedom pass holder, I have to tell you, getting here for a quarter of 10.
No. It's not enough staff. But that surely is a great selling point, that over 60 you can get your transport here for free and not having to park, which isn't cheap either, to park here, and the stress of parking and the fact that people whack your car in the car park and all that fun. And we don't really go for it, do we? We could, but I agree, working with the local authority is going to be key.
Maybe encourage it more, is that who knew this was a hot topic, so Hillary.
So as somebody who's only ever travelled to BHRUT on public transport to date, but thanks to Caroline, I often get a partial way trip on the way home. And also for weddings and bar mitzvahs. And as a freedom pass holder as well, because before 9 it is not free. You know, this morning I got to Goodmayes and it was 23 minutes for the next bus. So I walked. I actually thought, what the hell, need some exercise. Walked about half the way and ended up running to the bus stop to get it the other half of the way, which gave me time for a Costa. But I just wonder if there's, I can almost feel a survey coming on. Do we have any idea what we're thinking about patients use public transport? Because I got off the bus with quite a few people and we've got a healthy number of buses both here and at Queen's side. And even getting to the CDC and Barking isn't difficult. You know, you to walk around the corner from the tube.
St George's, it's just down the road from Hornchurch Station.
Yeah. And there's loads of buses that drop.
I just hate sitting in traffic, to be honest. I can get so much more done sitting on a train with that. But I just wonder if there's a way we could nudge, and I think the TfL has a support on that. I mean, to be fair, the EL3 normally runs every 10 or 11 minutes. That's just unlikely.
Yes, it was about the percentage of our carbon footprint. I guess we need to work out is from that scope that Sue mentioned, because it's out of scope. We've got 3 scopes on page 831 of the report. The travel is outside of that. We need to see what the cost benefit analysis of that would be in working in partnership with our local authority, and but particularly other partners such as TfL around there. But looking at the ones that are in scope, I think by 2032 we could make a significant reduction based on those around the 60% reduction in the next 5 years and the full 80%. But I think this is really ambitious and it's a good plan, and there's a really good discussion around this. As we have a half-yearly update on where we get to this progress on that, but particularly I like the idea of the TfL stuff, because there are blue light discounts for services. I think one is probably the biggest cost for our staff.
But subject to those comments being taken on board, are we happy to approve the report? Yeah, brilliant, thank you. Okay, on to finance. Mike, the finance report for month 4.
Great, thank you, Sarah. And lots of the key messages Matthew and Mabu have touched on already, but just to re-emphasise, so at month 4, which was the end of July, we were £6.2 million off of the plan. That was a £10 million deficit. Of that 6 million, it's kind of 2 items in there, which is the loss of deficit support funding. So we knew at the end of Q3 that would be withheld because we were off plan. That was 1.9 million, and the industrial action cost us about £1 million. So those 2 elements feature within the 6.2 million. The main focus on the rest of the variance is in pay, as we know. So despite the fact, the numbers have been quoted around agency reduction and bank reduction and meeting those national targets, we have to find a way of going further, particularly on our bank spend. We've worked on the financial recovery plan, which has been submitted to the region. That leaves us still with a gap of £9 to £10 million to find in our kind of best case scenario in order to get our plan. Capital is progressing well. Most of the capital plan had business case approval now, or nearing the end of business case approval. So quite confident that we will progress the capital plan as expected. And then on cash, we have a cash application in with support of the regional team into national, waiting to hear back on the outcome of that. And in the meantime, we're managing to sustain an average payment practice code level of about 90%. So get more difficult, but that's what we're sustaining at the moment.
Good. Thank you very much. Really helpful update, and obviously we realise just how challenging it is, and let's hope we hear soon on the cash application. That'd be really helpful. Any comments? Thanks for that direct airing. It's quick, so helpful. Thank you. Okay, shall we move on to workforce improvement?
Yeah, so we've already covered much of the progress that we've made in agency spend. Our vacancy rates, just taking the paper as read, but just calling out a few highlights. Our vacancy retention rates both remain below or at our target, below 10% for vacancy rates. And we're on track when our newly qualified nurses who we're expecting to come on board join to get this down to around 5%, which is a significant accomplishment here. In terms of what we're doing more generally to support the long-term progress here, we've talked a bit about the work that we're doing to manage sickness and moving into that prevention space. Regarding employee relations, our new grievance process has been introduced and is having positive feedback. I think it's launched and started very well. And this is feedback that I've had from people on both those raising and also on the receiving end of grievances as well. So that's positive, directing us to take a more informal type of approach. We've also had approval to invest in training our own in-house mediators, which will help us to go even further in helping to address things early on before they reach the point of going informal. We've already talked a bit about our GP service that we'll be launching, and we're continuing to make good progress in ensuring people take their annual leave.
Good. Very positive. Thank you very much. Any comments or questions on this one?
It's a comment. Janine's seen and spoken about the early resolution. There's a real, I believe there'll be a real financial impact there, and it would be something. I mean, it's been, you know, it's a sliding doors moment, so you can't necessarily get the data to compare. But we do know from other information that early resolution stops, you know, some very expensive processes going through. Is much better in every way. So I think that although it's been mentioned in a very low key way, I think that will make a significant difference.
And not only across community, we impact that all parties of things are resolved quickly, because it is, I'm sure it has a really lasting impact if people are grievances are raised and then people are suspended, and actually that return to work afterwards can be so it's really good to have abilities for managing swiftly and get to a resolution.
As part of my postgrad on conflict resolution and mediation, my dissertation was about the grievance process, and the evidence suggested that nobody who went through a grievance, even if it had a positive outcome, actually felt happy at the end.
Yeah.
So at the early resolution.
Totally negative. Yeah. Good. That's good. Excellent. Thank you. Okay. On to operations. So our integrated performance report.
Thank you. Okay, so I mean, it's great to present the really strong performance report for the last month, and I say that because we've heard throughout our meeting today about increased attendances, additional demand and pressure in our UEC. We've also heard about all the work we're doing around EPR, and so that's obviously taking a lot of people's time away from shop floor. So yeah, I mean, a little bit of pride around how much work people are doing and how well that's being received in performance terms. Briefly working through the pack, being the third best on all types UEC is quite a proud moment for me as Chief Operating Officer. But I would say that against the backdrop of about 100 extra patients a day, it's really, really busy, and we do have a finite number of staff and a finite physical space to fit people in. So the onus is on us around flow and getting people seen and treated and out of the organisation as quickly as possible. On our type 1, I've said before, one of the focuses of our improvement within our A&E department has always got to be on those patients that walk into ED and we treat them specifically without going through the UTC. You can see more recently some improvement around the performance there. I know it's relatively small percentages, but it's actually demonstrating that the things we're doing, the initiatives we're implementing to keep people either away from ED or get them through ED quicker, things around same day care, the Frailty SDEC, the Ageing Well unit, they're all starting to make a difference. On the backdrop that the denominator changes all the time and it gets busier and busier and busier. So I just I won't talk about it for long, but it is worth regularly looking at the ED data because it's delivered in aggregate and actually asking yourself, what is it showing me? Is it showing improvement? And how are we doing that? So that is the data there. And as we talk about winter later on, I'll talk a little bit more about the operational requirements we have to shore up and make sure those services are resilient throughout the winter. Type 2 is for information and just demonstrates resilience. We've talked a lot and do talk a lot about mental health. And, you know, the figures speak for themselves. We are still a high provider of mental health services in the UEC pathways. And we continue to work with all our partners, who are police and LAS and NELFT, to try and make a better offering for mental health patients in crisis who use A&E departments as the first place of safety. So we continue to work hard on that. The site summaries are interesting because they get underneath the skin a little bit of what is going on in this hospital, and is it any different at King George's to Queen's? Are the usual metrics and measures we use telling us something that we need to be aware of? And so the King George's site summary tells us some really nice things. Number one is that the length of stay in all domains, anyone over 7 days, 14 and 21, is reducing. So flow is strong. Patients are being admitted and discharged from the hospital. And that is one of the ingredients of a resilient and strong organisation. Equally, in the graph below, we've got really good news around criteria to reside, which used to be called delayed transfer of care or discharge ready or medical care. Basically, patients who are fit enough to leave an acute bed, but probably need some form of community support to allow them to go back to their usual place of residence. And when we talk about winter late, this is a real problem for the health service. If they, the worst case scenario is patients are called bed blockers. It basically means we need that bed and we don't need you to be in it anymore. So that this data shows that despite the difficulties of working multi-agency, despite some of the financial problems we have as a wider system, and despite people needing more and more wraparound care post being in hospital, we are still reducing our beds that are medically fit to go home. So a really big pat on the back for the King George's site team and all of the clinicians that work at King George's. Similarly, for Queen's, good news around the criteria to reside patients, really good news, because again, those beds are precious, we need those for A&E. The length of stay has gone up, which is not because we're not discharging people anymore. It's because we've opened a frailty estate, which is a same-day emergency facility. It ticks all the boxes around making sure frail and elderly people are not looked after in the corridor. It reduces 12-hour waits, and it stops us admitting people to hospital that probably didn't need to come in. And so, unintended consequences apart, it makes it look like people are in hospital longer, but the denominator of people coming in has changed. So that's just a bit of a highlight for Queen's site, and I say this deliberately because we have some people whose only job is to look after Queen's, and some people's whose only job is to look after King George's. Onto our planned care programme, which we have well rehearsed in this forum. Our 52-week waits stand around 500 to 600. The target nationally is for that to be no more than 1% of your overarching PTL, and it isn't. And so, as much as I would like to make that number disappear very, very quickly, I will make sure that it stays in the 1% zone. And we will work harder, particularly around these services highlighted in this update, to make sure those waits continue to reduce. That said, we are 12th best in the country at RTT 18 weeks, and that's a very proud moment for everybody who delivers planned care services and provides the operational design around that. So well done to the team. Our DMO1 BOOP has already mentioned that, is compliant. It's below 5%, so all our diagnostic services on aggregate deliver a resilient and compliant performance standard. Our theatre utilisation remains high, but not high enough, and we do need to work harder to get that extra sort of 4% higher in terms of theatre utilisation, but nonetheless, we don't waste theatre sessions. We don't have fallow sessions where we've spent a lot of money on a team that don't do any work. And as Sarah said at the beginning, we're starting to do these high volume initiatives, which actually really dig into waiting lists, highly successful for patients, and really get us into a better place around delivery. I'm going to finish with a couple of points around cancer. You will see a sea of green on the cancer scorecard, but particular focus now continues, should I say, on the 62-day backlog, which is patients who we haven't told them yet what we're doing in treatment terms or what is wrong with them. We will focus on those, continuing to focus on those. As Saf said earlier, my requirement of the team is to tell people they haven't got cancer as quickly as possible. And so lots and lots of work continued around that. And our final slide, just for completeness, triangulates everything I've just said with our operational plan that the board signed off at the beginning of the year. The operational plan being linked to money, linked to performance, and linked to delivery. And it's RAG rated to show you where we are compliant and non-compliant against that plan. Thank you.
Thank you. And I mean, it really is a privilege to be performing in such an impressive way under such extreme pressure. And I think it's testament to the whole team. So we are managing to do that, and consistently so. It's not just moments of good news. It's been a steady pace. The shortlisting of the trust for the year, but well deserved. So just thank you to all of you, all of your teams, because it's a really good place to be and really positive story.
Yes, and apologies to labour the point, because I know we've already discussed this morning and this afternoon. Mental health, I just think that pie chart is pretty shocking, because there are almost as many, I mean, it's 225, I can't remember find the page, but almost as many at Queen's as there are at Goodmayes, but the number at here compared with the place over there is kind of heading for double. And is that because people have medical problems? Is it because people, or do people turn up here because they know it's next to Goodmayes? Sort of seems a bit odd.
Okay, so there's lots of ways into ED. So first of all, the police quite often bring patients straight to A&E. Quite often due to the way they're presenting, they could be medically unwell as well as having a mental health crisis. The London Ambulance Service tend to bring patients straight to A&E as opposed to a mental health assessment unit, again for the same reasons. There are, many presentations of mental health, but many patients have some form of, maybe they're drunk, maybe they're under the influence of substances. So it's a really difficult one to unpick. It's not as simple as can everyone just go to Goodmayes all of a sudden and then they all do. Because if it was, we'd have done it. Yeah. But there is another piece, which is that A&Es are great big open doors. We're used to using them as the catch-all for all problems in society and all sorts of other things. And so what we're trying to do, what we are doing, Hilary, what we are doing is looking at the data, asking ourselves, are there things we need to change? Do we need other agencies to change their behaviour and stop using ED as the default provider? And the data in the pack is deliberately there to keep that at the top of our agenda, to make sure it is our priority, and to make sure that when we assure ourselves or say we are working together, we are also being very honest with ourselves and saying, is it making any difference? So the answer at the moment is, I'm afraid, no, it's not making a huge amount of difference, but the activity is going up. And so the denominator is changing again. And we as a sector, but also as a London, and probably nationally now, have got a lot more work to do on our strategic approach to delivery of mental health care.
At least the average length of stay in department does seem to be on the way down. It bumps up and down, but it's.
Caroline, Leslie, and then Ruth.
I think you're absolutely right. Working with partners, because it's even if you were performing 100% every single day, you couldn't be entirely green with all of these other things happening. When I came in this morning and walked past ED, there's a nurse trying to coax somebody back in who was clearly having an episode. Is there any, and, you know, apologies if this is something being, you know, that's already been considered, but that the folk next door could provide a couple of people, even just for a week, to be in King George ED and triage some of those people and add some support.
You're already there.
Yeah.
King George's has, now have 2 rooms at King George's. They have a psychiatric liaison room and they have, the nurses room. They're based in outpatients. The triage, provider in our ED is a NELFT employee. And,
So what's happening?
So what's happening is, I mean, in order to, so you have to be medically cleared before you can go to a medical health vet. So if you're drunk or if you're under substances, under the influence of substances, there is a period of time where you have to, you know, get to the point where you can become just a mental health patient. So I think there's loads of things that people are presenting with that aren't as easy as you need to come into a bed, there's the bed, off you go. I think what I would suggest we did, if I may, is maybe to do a board seminar on mental health pathways at some point, maybe before, just during or before winter, and maybe to see if we can do that as a board to board, because what we're tending to do now is try and make sure that when we say what we're doing about mental health at BHIUT, we're standing next to our fellow comrades at NELFT saying the same thing. So rather than give you like loads of examples of why it takes a long time, I think maybe a bit of a well-rounded presentation with all factors considered might be quite useful.
Looking at the now I think newly appointed Chief Clinical Officer for the ICB, who's a consultant psychiatrist by background, Paul Balloon.
I have Paul's number on speed dial.
Speaking
We are well versed in asking Paul, but yes, I think this is an important area for lots and lots of detailed discussion, and I'd be delighted to share that with you, but recognise probably haven't got the time now. Matthew,
Yeah, I mean, generally London-wide, there's been a growth in both acute and chronic presentations of mental ill health over the last 5 years. Things like the pandemic have an effect. Economic downturns always increase the amount of demand on mental health services. And prior to the pandemic, there was a really big push to reduce the bed base in mental health and to encourage far more care for people in the community. So what we've had is a number of years where the system is trying its very hardest to reduce the use of beds. Then we've had broader societal factors that have increased acute mental ill health, as well as increasing the amount of anxiety and depression that's going into services like improving access to psychotherapies as well. So we've kind of had a perfect storm of a reduced service footprint. And NELFT actually, I remember when I became Chief Executive Officer, we were pointed towards NELFT as a brilliant example of a provider with a very low bed base and very strong community provision. And so NELFT,
Careful what you wish for.
well, I mean, NELFT runs with a very low length of stay. Actually, it benchmarks really well on its length of stay for inpatient mental health patients, but it also has a very, very small bed base. And now in the current context we're in, there's the national policies to continue to drive down that bed usage as well, which is why they end up relying on out of area placements. The other thing to Fiona's point is psychiatric liaison is specialty and reach into your emergency department. So NELFT run a liaison team. In the same way that cardiology has a team that comes down to ED and looks after cardiology patients, liaison are the front end psychiatry there. Now, it runs though it was constructed for quite a purist model, whereby you have to be clear of everything else before you then move across to mental health. So we will have patients who are taken to the Section 136 week therapy piece, but because they've had a drink or because they've taken drugs, in the same way that police custody sergeants now will not accept drunk patients into police custody, we'll send them to A&E instead. So we get all those patients brought in here. And that's why you'll have a dozen patients downstairs under our care. You'll have an empty crisis hub at NELFT because we're waiting for them to dry out effectively. Once you apply a section to a patient, they can't move from the location in which they're sectioned. So if you end up with a section 2 or a section 3 applied to a patient who's already in our emergency department, they can only then be moved out of there when you've got the address of the place to which they're sectioned under the Mental Health Act, which has to be the inpatient bed. So if someone is in here because of drugs, they're seen by a liaison, they're sectioned here, they cannot then be transferred to the crisis hub and now before they move into a mental health hub. And there's work underway nationally to try to change the Mental Health Act. But some of these legal restrictions mean effectively, although there is facility at now to take more patients from there are things that make it very, very hard for that to happen at the minute. And so it's a really difficult, really complicated area of care.
I think it was Leslie and then Rosemary.
I think Fiona's suggestions are really helpful, and as Mabu was raised before, there's the demographic issue that we have here of the numbers of hostels within this part of North East London for people that have substance misuse issues, and we know that there is a very high level, particularly in Redbridge, of people with no recourse to public funds who have substance abuse, misuse challenges and are living on the street, which just becomes, it adds to the challenge that we face here, which perhaps don't get faced in other parts of London. And I was also just going to raise the issue about children and young people. If we were going to start getting some figures, because we don't have any data around the length of stay for children and young people in ED.
Or in ED or general children.
It's children that they looked after children in care, where we know that we struggle and we've become a place of safety, which we shouldn't. So it would be useful to get some data to see whether that is a continuing issue, whether it's getting any better. I know it's probably erratic.
It's really erratic and it tends to be it's relatively small numbers, but relatively high impact, as you know. And it's particularly linked to, as you say, the high number of placements, regulated and unregulated, in Redbridge and just above both of our hospitals, to be honest. I have raised that issue at London Region with regard to understanding the impact that has on our two hospitals. The ICB are fully aware and regularly updated by Matthew and I about when there is a looked after child that needs a lot of complex support. I think maybe because of the numbers, Leslie, that's probably a report by exception, and possibly, maybe a quarterly report through QAC, just highlighting what's going on and maybe some of the contributing factors. It's wholly unsatisfactory for all parties, including obviously notwithstanding the child. But we find ourselves in a regularly being the coordinator of ongoing placement for these children.
It's sort of why I'm not raising it because I'm in any way critical of you, but I think it's an issue like the mental health problem, which needs regularly raising it because it is not suitable for young people to be in an emergency.
I agree.
Two quick points. Yeah, I agree a joint board would be helpful, but I would also ask therefore someone from the community also talks about pathways in that way as well, because I think that's key. I think the other thing this is kind of away from ED, but I think it does affect our ED, is we're also, I don't think, particularly good at recognising our moderate mental health during admissions or even just presenting at ED. So they don't have to be a mental health admission, but the reality is that mental health and chronic illness and acute illness do go hand in hand. And I don't think we take a lot of responsibility to signpost patients to the right services or encourage them to come into those and use our voluntary sector, of which there is heaps out there. But it's just recognising that when you've got a touch point with the patient, you do need to try and do as much as you can at that point, because otherwise they just keep cycling round. And yes, that also needs to be signposted to primary care at the same time. So
if it has been recognised, they're very low on the ward, don't just simply say, go to your GP to talk about it. It should be already, we've spoken about it, these are the things we signposted to, and we've asked them to follow up with you.
Okay, lots of challenge on the mental health front, and we'll have a think about what we do towards the board. That sounds like a specific area of conversation, probably be sensible. Okay, let's move on to winter planning.
Okay, so I suppose this is here really to ask for board support or permission to comply with the national timetable around winter submissions. And this winter submission is due in on the 30th September, and that falls outside another board in terms of approval. The reason for the approval request is that this year's annual return is very much focused about getting the board to sign up to the winter plan. So assurance around, you know, have I made a good plan? Do you agree with it? Do you think it will deliver? Number one. And number two, has very, very specific measurements around constitutional standards and operational delivery, which are not used to anyone in terms of measurement, but the fact that we're being asked to commit to these delivery pieces in terms of ops, for me means there's a new approach nationally to getting us to confirm our commitment to delivering winter. This is not about spending money. This is about making sure the organisation is resilient. This is about making sure that we understand what good will look like during the winter, and it's also about testing whether we know what to do when things aren't going well and how to respond. So if I may ask the board's permission to present the winter plan after I have submitted nationally, please.
Yes, so what I think we're also suggesting is that it will be possible for that plan to go and be seen at the Finance and Improvement Performance Committee.
Yeah.
Before it has to be submitted, so it will get some scrutiny and then come to board after that.
Yeah.
But we'll delegate that authority. We are happy to agree to that. Good. Thank you. Right, on to audit. Sue.
Thank you. The more astute amongst you may well feel that my report has a little bit of Groundhog Day element to it. So my intention is to move past that component swiftly. We've already seen the minutes of the extraordinary board meeting where we received the annual accounts and what was at that point the draft auditor's annual report. It was draft because they hadn't had the opportunity to go through their internal quality control procedures. They have now done that, and the report is unchanged, and therefore, in order to dot the I's and cross the T's, it is brought once more to you, but it is no different to the one you received at the extraordinary board meeting. So really just for noting, I would suggest. And we have the accounts coming at the AGM very shortly. So things that I would like to draw to the board's attention. As we said previously, it was a good audit. We completed on time, and that has given us the opportunity to reflect on our procedures and processes. And we are currently taking the opportunity of the time afforded to us to undertake a very deep review of how we carry out the production of our annual report and accounts, with a view to receiving a report at the audit committee in the next months. I suspect it might take a couple of iterations. We're currently deep in the diagnostic phase, and we're looking forward to seeing an outcome from that in October that will tell us things that we can improve upon, and we will be monitoring that regularly through audit committee. So that's probably all I want to say on external audit, other than to note that Mazars, who are our external auditors, have been themselves subject to quality review processes, primarily in their corporate audit space, but our particular audit partner has also had one of his NHS audits reviewed, not ours. And they have actually come out of that independent and objective review with flying colours. So that gives us good assurance as the quality of the work that they do, and therefore the support that affords to us. So our congratulations to them, and it makes us feel good about who we've got doing that work for us. In terms of internal audit and local counter fraud, board members will recall that we've only recently appointed a new provider for those services. So it is early days in the cycle of business for both of those functions. But 3 audits are underway, and we expect to see the reports on those shortly. We have strengthened the process of agreeing the terms of reference for those audits, so one of our learnings, and those terms of reference will be coming to the committee members in advance of commencing the audits, so that they can review them and be assured that they are going to focus on the areas that the committee is needing work to be done. So that process has begun. And also the new internal auditors have picked up any outstanding actions from the last set of audits to make sure that they are completed. So a good start. So far, so good. Looking forward to receiving the first reports for them. In terms of counter fraud, I would report similarly. Just to reiterate to the board something we've raised before, there is a new failure to prevent fraud offence that extends the obligations on our staff and ourselves. And we are keen to make sure that we are doing all the things that we need to in that space to make sure people are aware, people are trained. And that is one of the components that our local counter fraud team will be reviewing and providing assurance. But currently they are saying we're pretty much doing all the right things already. So that's good news. We also received a number of other reports, many of which are on the agenda. The board assurance framework, we had an update on that, but that has its own moments of glory shortly coming up on the agenda. Corporate risk register was a real transformation. So I know the board are aware we've been doing a lot of work on risk. And this was the first time where we could really see that work crystallising into a real step change in how risk is being reported, and is splitting out corporate risks from clinical group risks in a way that really allows us to focus on what we need to be looking at. So the committee was really pleased to see that step change. And we were also pleased to see how the risks are being articulated in a way that our colleagues can understand them and the relevance of them to the work that they do, and can use them as a management tool. So yeah, I can't really say too much about how excited we were to see that improvement. Sad, I know, but there you go. So we're now looking forward to seeing that really iterate forward and see actions that will help us to mitigate and control those risks. But it's a much stronger risk register now, and we're really pleased to report that. Health and safety report, the annual report will be coming here, and our usual other components of Trust Seal. I don't think I have anything else of significance to report. Thank you. Thank you.
And just wanted to put on record thanks to Linda and to Kerry and others for the work on the risk register, particularly Linda's put a huge amount of time and energy into this. And I know the auditors were concerned about it. I think we've now got a description of our risk appetite and our core corporate risks. It's as good as you could expect to see anywhere. And I think there's a huge amount of work going into that. So we'll make sure we keep that in good shape.
I'm really disappointed Leslie hasn't talked about the risk of the bathrooms on walls.
Better articulated.
Brilliant. I really cheered me up when I got to that point.
Finally, I was grateful it was properly articulated and I understood what the risk was, which is not the bathroom. Not the walking bathroom risk. It is such a lovely piece of work now. We don't have to, Lou and I don't have to do that audit committee double act anymore.
Yeah. My favourite was the risk of mirth. Seriously, we had on the risk register risk of mirth.
We want more mirth, don't we?
Well, we want more mirth. Why is the risk? And it's an IT system. I know now. And it's been sorted, so it's gone. Thank you. Okay, so that was good. I don't think there's any supportive comments. Very good.
Let's go on to the trust seal. Use of seal. So that's just requesting the seal used on 5 occasions since June. They're all actually building projects, all actually relating to King George Hospital, which is enabling works for EPRs.
To ratify indeed. Good.
So, health and safety annual report.
Okay, the annual report covers all of our health and safety activities. We've had a bit of reorganisation throughout the year. We've done some updating of policies and making sure that we're up to speed, but most importantly, we have made a decision to finally house health and safety within the Estates and Facilities Directorate. I think it is the most moved team in the hospital and has been gifted around the organisation over many years. So we've given them a permanent home under Sean's leadership. We have an operational chair for the Health and Safety Committee, which is the Director of Operations for King George's. So thereby making sure we've got health and safety, estates and facilities and ops all in the same space. So that is the triangulation you need to make sure things are safe, people are safe, and the facilities and buildings that we work with are safe too. So around the governance and the policies update, we've got a good audit programme. We audit areas, we re-audit areas, and we obviously maintain high levels of compliance. Let's not forget we've got 2 types of building. We've got a PFI building with soft FM services provided by other people, and we don't own all of that building. We're not in charge of it all, but we've also got King George's, which is a wholly owned facility, and therefore so we almost have 2 types of health and safety programme at the same time. Vitals, these are the reports around injuries at work and other incidences which we are I mean, it's down to people reporting, it's down to people knowing what to report and why, and it's down to how serious the nature of that report would be. And so we continue through the audits, through the word, and through keeping the right people in the committees to do lots of work around that. Moving and handling is just about training. It's about making sure you've got the right equipment, but it's also about making sure people are well trained, regularly practicing and using different ways of moving and handling to reduce risk. Violence and aggression we have talked about, but does also fall in through the threat of violence through the health and safety team. And we are again triangulating the work around violence and aggression with the estates team and all of the other activities that go on through the steering group. And occupational health, again, which sits very firmly in Janine's domain, but keeping people well, making sure they're safe, dealing with disabilities and making appropriate adjustments for people at work is also the business of the health and safety team, and so we keep an eye on that as well. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. The comprehensive report. Let's see. And I'm glad they've got a happy home. Okay, thank you. No comments on that one. Good. So we're on to the board assurance.
So you've got the full board assurance framework. So this is the full report since the board did its work on risk appetite earlier in the spring. The board committees have reviewed all of the back sheets during the course of the summer, and all of those sheets are included within the report. I just wanted to flag a few things from the summary report, really, and that is that you've now got you've got the heat map showing the spread of the risks across the 5x5 matrix, and you've got a summary tracker
of the risk scores for all of the risk, all of the 13 risk areas, showing whether we are inside or outside risk appetite and tolerance. So that's quite a move forward for the organisation to have that. We can track that. So when we look at that, we've got risk areas that are outside of both appetite and tolerance, and I've listed those. So that's maternity services, VBC, care, patient safety rather, digital, performance, financial sustainability, and inequalities. We've got two BAF risk areas that are both within appetite and tolerance, and that's planned care performance and partnership working. So those areas are green, and then the remaining are all within tolerance, but outside of appetite. I think the key bit to flag from the committee reviews and from the work that we've undertaken, and I put this in a that series posed a number of pages, and that's now that we know what position to our agreed appetite and tolerance, what will actually move the dial, be we know that these risks are quite big areas that will move slowly, but what do we actually need to do in terms of mitigations and actions to move us into that tolerance zone? And that's the first step, target stroke tolerance. So that's the focus really of the next question that depends on exactly in some of the needs for these risks when we review the BAF. So just wanted to flag that we're cited on that soon, and you should go into answer the question and then to answer the question through the next series of reports as best we can. The only other things that I really wanted to flag are that following review of how we agreed our objectives this year, in discussion with Janine, we actually felt that the manager's licence deliverable really sat better from the inequalities BAF and moving it into creating a diverse and inclusive workplace. We would move that into that. And then the only other thing to flag is that there's been some better articulation of the deliverables on number one, which is the quality and safety BAF risk. So we will update the other quality and safety risks, those deliverables, to really requesting the board to approve the current position, notice the progress made, using the risk appetite, what the next steps are, to answer any questions in relation to process and exactly leads obviously in the room. There's any detailed specifics on their risk areas. Thank you.
And thank you. It's a huge amount of work, and it's real progress having dealt with the, all the risk work and feeding into this, and I think it's significantly more sense. It's more of a living up.
Ruth, just two I wanted a question on the heat map, so 2.1, maternity services. Would we be looking to downgrade that considering the latest CQC pulling it down to 12? And also, just wanted the justification of inequalities being in that score, being it's with the other things, and it just doesn't feel like that would have a major impact comparatively. And again, would that normally not move down to moderate? I think especially with the steps that you have made, I think they've been so significant that really does it deserve to come down in impact? It feels like it should be, but I didn't know. I'm not in that committee, so I don't to know why it's there.
Yeah, so I think we've been back and forth on that. I think the reason why I've maintained the score where it is that whilst the likelihood has gone down, I think the impact, should the wheels fall off and it go horribly wrong, would still remain very high. And so that's the limiting factor in how low we can hope to reduce that score by.
But isn't that meant to be where we are at the moment, not if it goes? See what I mean? I personally, I think you've reduced the risk down to moderate rather than major. It's just when you compare it to urgent and emergency care patient experience and what that means, it just doesn't. It's what I find it helpful that you put that all in the one chart now, so you can compare them against each other, and it just feels like that one is out of kilter. And thankfully now also maternity feels, again, like we've had so much positive, still at risk, isn't it? Oh my goodness, but it just doesn't feel like it's the same risk as we had before, and yet it's still at the same number.
Whether the maternity one needs to wait till we actually hear back from you.
Yes, it does.
But, yes.
We can take the EDI one away and look at it. I'm only one person, so don't get it on me.
I mean, actually, I'm in
I think some of the elements, and we've had this discussion, but some of the elements of the inequalities one are also about patient care. It's not just about workforce. There were some issues that we had around gynae and waiting times and things like that. So it isn't all about staff. It's partly it's about patients, but so it's a bit across two committees, but we could certainly look at it.
Yeah. So I think Nick's coming in and then consider and then, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Linda knows what I'm going to say, because I would bring the maternity one down, because I don't think it needs CQC validation around it. I think we're being responsive. We know we've invested in the triage, we've put the phone line in, they've put the extra staff in. So we'd be very odd, I would say, that if we then didn't reduce the risk when we put that amount of mitigation in place. And we know through the data we're seeing through the Quality and Safety Committee, we're seeing benefits. And we're also seeing FFP improvements. So we've got metrics that are showing that. So if we were proactively reviewing the risk, then I would say it should come down.
And when is the next opportunity? Because how frequently do you review that as an exec team when you would be able to do that?
In the executive risk management meeting, which is a newly formed group, we're meeting in 2 weeks' time. And so we'll review maternity risk and take on board Nick's comments with them, but also pick up the inequalities one that we give the opportunity for the whole executive team to further review the inequalities back in the light of the challenge raised by Ruth, and the discussion that would have been held at PCC. So in the round, we look at those again, and then they come back to the committee and then to board again.
If PCC and FIC, because some of these,
Yes,
it's not just PCC.
And maternity will come to QAC on the 25th of September, so it's about 4 months.
There's a constant cycle of budget. Constant. Sorry. Basically, no, there's a rolling programme. We have now got the executive risk management group, and that's really after the summer break. So we're having that meeting, and that gives us an opportunity to challenge each other and further triangulate.
On the, and Ruth's quite right in raising inequalities risk. At the last PIC meeting, then it went on to a conversation at PCC on the inequalities that we haven't got sufficient data at the moment on there. We're hoping that as soon as we've got the ability to pull it out of EPR, we'll then have a more granular understanding of about access, outcomes, impact on our demographics, and then we'll be able to look at that risk properly. And that timing that both committees have discussed, having a collective approach towards diving into that area as well. So it won't happen anytime soon. I prefer to keep the risk there where it is because the impact on patients, and then we'll have a proper look at it, probably as in Q4 of this year.
Thank you. I really just wanted to pay tribute to the fact that Linda's got this here for us, because it has created this conversation, which is one I've been looking forward to for some time, which is the calibration across the entire BAF, because they do have to be done in the first instance in silos by the people who are working with them and experiencing them. And it's only when you surface them all together that you're able to compare and contrast. And we are all slightly using a different scorecard or a different ruler. So this conversation is one that as a board, I would suggest we should be having probably every 6 months. So following the executive risk management group somehow. So I leave scheduling to others. But this is the nub of this. And to Linda's point about and what are we doing about it? Are we doing enough to move it? That conversation is absolutely vital, because some of us are clearly saying we have done enough to move maternity, for instance. So let's capture that and then we can move it. So the trouble with this is whenever you take a snapshot, you get a letter from the CQC a week later and it suddenly it's out of date, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think this is brilliant, because this is a board conversation that we should be having regularly.
And it is a dynamic. It's Tuesday.
Great, okay, thank you. Really helpful, good to see it in the shape and good to know that it gets regular reviews. And we'll come back with steps to take. Thank you very much. So last item formally on this for the agenda, the fit and proper. So as you see, I don't have to go through it in detail, but we carried out our regular fit and proper persons test, getting all of the appropriate documentation and all the self-assessments and the other checks, previous checks and so on, and we're able to submit our annual report confirming that we have satisfied complied with our obligations and that we have a board that is full of fit and proper people. So that's gone in as it should, and we're able to sign our statement. So thank you very much. Use. No issues. Have fit and proper people around the table. Okay. So that brings us to the end of our formal agenda. Any other business? I don't have anything to raise, but does anyone want to raise anything under any? As ever, always welcome to send through comments on meeting effectiveness, and look forward to any of that and any observations. And feel free to send them through to me or indeed to Linda and our company secretary. And that brings us on to questions for the public. If there are any.
Yes, yes, thank you, Chair. In light of the coroner's report today about future deaths, I'm concerned that really recent times it's going to be impacting upon sepsis deaths. I raised the issue of 12-hour waits last time around. Have you been considering any work on that and getting on the patients now?
So we're having a good look at it, and we're keeping 12-hour waits and a lot of review. I mean, if we had a look at yes last time, and in 50% of our 12-hour waits are over 70. And so most of the harm we see associated with the long waits tends to be in that elderly patient cohort. And as we heard today, the opening of a frailty same-day emergency care has really helped us with that. So we've seen that big increase in ED attendances, but our 12-hour waits have fallen, and we're now ranked in the top 20% of trusts in England for 12-hour waits as a share of our overall thing. So we are keeping an eye on it, but as you heard in Learn from Deaths review, we've benchmarked well in terms of mortality. Our HSMR and SHMI data doesn't indicate any death numbers you wouldn't expect in a hospital this size. For the younger patients in particular, it's about 2% of our 12-hour breaches are under 18s. The majority of them are either looked after children, which was raised by one of the non-exec directors today, but by number, the majority are mental health patients, the children under mental health services. So we've got no indication that there's a mortality risk particularly associated with that, but we will keep that under review. And as these things come up and as we plan our clinical audit cycles, we'll keep it in there. Sepsis is reported on through quality committee, and we do keep a close eye on the sepsis deaths as well. And there are regular audits of our sepsis.
Thank you for the detailed response. Okay, to ask a different question?
Indeed, yes, go ahead.
I'm concerned about the delay in getting the funding for £35 million A&E.
Yeah.
I mean, I can make a formal request under environmental regulations, with information, but are you able to publish correspondence or give it to me or publish on your site?
I mean,
for the past, what's been happening
I think
with
most-
yourselves
Yeah.
Department of Health in the past 12 months?
Yeah, I mean, most of what we've been doing, we've put it in the public domain. I mean, I think I've met the Minister for Health, Karen Smith, with Andrew Rosendale, that's the MP for Romford, and I think we've published the information about that meeting. And what we're hopeful about is that NHS England now starting to move to longer term capital allocations. Part of the problem we have is you get an annual sum, and then there's a treasury limit on how much you can spend. North East London gets the lowest allocation of capital of any part of London and has historically been underfunded for capital. And the NICB has raised this with NHS England. But our hope is that by moving into a multi-year capital allocation, we'll be able to make the case for our A&E. We've been working on the plans. I think Fiona's seeing the architect again on Monday. And we've got a good suite now of clinically led plans for the A&E redesign there. If and when any money starts to appear, we're ready to start building. And in the meantime, we're doing the best we can within a pretty inadequate physical environment.
Thank you.
So there's no secret correspondence to share, and I think we're quite happy to tell you everything and anything we're doing on that.
Thank you very much.
Very much. Great. So if there are no more questions, we can bring the meeting to a close. Our next meeting is on the 6th of November. And in the meantime, have a short break, but at 4 o'clock, we've got the excitement of our AGM. So, news hang around. Thank you.
Is it here?
Yes, thank you.
It's a good bedtime, isn't it?